Hello. So for this week, we're talking about Chapter 7, Utility Maximization. And we're also going to the concept of the diminishing marginal utility, right? And we'll be leading to a discussion about consumer choice. So we'll start off with diminishing marginal utility. Diminishing. It just means it's getting smaller, right? And so the concept is, as consumption of a good or service increases, the marginal utility obtained from each additional unit or good or service decreases. Say food, right? That first plate of food provides you a lot of utility. That second plate of food, well, you're already kind of full, so it's a little bit less utility. That third plate of food, even less utility, until you get to the point where it provides you absolutely no benefit at all. And actually, it could be hurting you, right? Making you sick. You keep eating or eating and so on. And it explains the downward sloping demand curve, right? So although consumers' wants in general are insatiable, right, wants for specific commodities can be fulfilled. The more of a specific product that consumers obtain, the less they desire more units of that product. So the theory of consumer behavior uses law of diminishing marginal utility to explain how consumers allocate their income. And now, the terminology, right? Utility is a subjective notion in economics, referring to the amount of satisfaction the person gets from consumption of a certain item. Utility and usefulness are not the same thing, right? Items that are essentially useless can provide a lot of utility. Now, in economics, we measure utility in terms of util, or UTILs, right? Total utility is the total amount of satisfaction one gets from a consumption of a single product or a combination of products. Total utility can be derived by adding up the utils of successive units consumed. So if you say Coke, right, it gives you 10 utils of utility, each one. And you're addicted, so they keep going. Right, the first can of Coke is 10. The second can of Coke is another 10. The marginal utility is still 10, but the total utility is now 20 between the two cans. The third can is an additional 10 for that marginal utility for just that third can, but the total utility between all three cans is now 30. Right, so marginal utility refers to the extra utility a consumer gets from the additional 1 unit of a specific product. In a short period of time, the marginal utility from successive units up to a given product will decline. Right? This is known as diminishing marginal utility. Now, we'll see in two curves here, right? This is the total utility, and this is the marginal utility. Now, they're graphed from the same data here. This total utility graph is taken from this total utility, and the marginal utility is taken from this marginal utility. Now, total utility increases at a diminishing rate. First is 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, then 0, and then negative, right? And then declines. Marginal utility, by definition, reflects the changes in total utility. Thus, marginal utility diminishes with increased consumption, right? So you can see the marginal utility decreasing. And when utility becomes 0, utility is at its maximum, and is negative when total utility declines. As shown by the shaded rectangles, utility is the change in total utility associated with each additional unit. In this case, it's tacos consumed per meal. Or alternatively, each new level of total utility is found by adding marginal utility to the preceding level of total utility. Now, the theory of rational behavior is the assumption that consumers try to use his or her money to derive the greatest satisfaction from it. Right? Each consumer has a clear-cut preference for certain goods and services available in the market, and has some idea how much marginal utility they might get from purchasing and consuming additional units. At any point in time, the consumer has a limited, fixed amount of money to spend. Right? They have fixed income. Every good has a price, and prices are unaffected by amounts purchased by the consumer. Goods and services have prices and are scarce relative to the demand for them. And so the consumer, right, wants to reach equilibrium themselves, right? Just as the whole economic system wants to reach equilibrium, the consumer wants to reach equilibrium. And equilibrium is reached when utility is balanced. And we're talking about balanced per dollar at the margin. When this is true, there is no incentive to alter the expenditure pattern unless tastes, income, or prices change. Right? When using the utility maximizing rule, right, it is important to express the marginal utility of the good as marginal utility per dollar spent, since the goods probably have different prices. Therefore, we just can't compare utilities of one object to another, right? Because we're comparing apples to oranges. So we have to find the marginal utility per dollar by dividing the marginal utility of product A by the price of product A, and marginal utility of product B by the price of product B. In equilibrium is when these two are equal. So, to put this in numerical format, right, it is assumed in this table that the amount of marginal utility received from additional units of each of the two products is independent of the quantity of the other product. Okay, so for example, the marginal utility schedule for apples, okay, is independent of the number of oranges obtained by the consumer. And so when we determine whether to buy apples or oranges, we compare the marginal utility per dollar. So this is the marginal utility per each unit, and this is the marginal utility per each unit of oranges. Now we bring in price, we normalize these two between each other. So the marginal utility per dollar for apples and the marginal utility per dollar of oranges. And now if you had money or something, you would say, okay, I want to buy what maximizes my marginal utility per dollar spent. So which provides me the most satisfaction? Well, this first orange provides me the most satisfaction. After that, this first apple and the second orange provide me an equal amount of satisfaction. Beyond that, this third orange provides me the next most satisfaction. Beyond that, it's the second apple and this fourth orange that provide me the next most satisfaction. And so if we have money to spend, say $10, what will we buy? Well, we definitely buy this first orange, right? That's $2. The second orange, another $2 for $4, and this one apple, that's $5 total. Beyond that, we buy this next orange, $7 total, this next orange, $9 total, and this second apple for $10. So for our $10, we would buy 2 apples and 4 oranges to maximize our utility. And this graph just shows that the decision-making process. Now, deriving the demand curve, right? At a price of $2, the consumer represented by the data in the table maximized utility by purchasing 4 oranges. That's what we just did. The decline in price of oranges to $1 disrupts the consumer's initial utility maximizing equilibrium. The consumer then restores equilibrium by purchasing 6 oranges rather than 4 oranges. Thus, a simple price quantity schedule emerges. Right? It creates 2 points in a downward sloping curve. So again, if we were saying price per orange went down to $1, so the marginal utility would change. Instead of being 12, it would be 24. Instead of being 10, it would be 20. 9 would be 18. 8 would be 16. 2 would be 12. And so then obviously we would purchase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 apples before even looking at, or 5 oranges before looking at an apple. So we buy these 5 apples at $1, $5. Or 5 oranges at $1 would be $5. 1 apple, right, that would be $6. The next apple here, $7, $8, $9 for this 4th apple, and this 6th orange would be $10. And that's what they're saying the 6 oranges come from at $1. Now, the substitution effect and income effect work simultaneously. The income effect is the impact that a price change has on consumers' real income and consequently on the quantity demanded of the good. If the price of a good falls, income is freed up, can be used to buy more of both or either good under consideration. The income effect is shown by the fact that a decline in price expands the consumer's real income, and the consumer can purchase more of this and other products until equilibrium is once again attained for the new level of real income. The substitution effect, right, is the impact that a change in a product's price has on its relative expensiveness and the quantity demanded. If the price of a product falls, this decreases its relative expensiveness, and thus the consumer will now substitute more of this good for the other. When the price of an item declines, the consumer will no longer be in equilibrium until more of the item is purchased and the marginal utility of the item declines to match the decline in price. More of this item is purchased rather than another relatively more expensive substitute. Now we talk about applications and extensions. Right, the first touchscreen tablet computer, the iPad, was a new product enormously popular with consumers and perceived by them as having a greater marginal utility than other alternatives products. This resulted in a major shift in demand for the new product, as consumers attempted to increase their total utility. So why do some goods that are essential to life have low prices and goods that are not essential have high prices? The marginal utility of the last unit of water consumed is small because we consume a lot of water. The marginal utility of the last diamond is large because we consume very few diamonds. Time also has a value, right? So this must be considered in decision making and utility maximization. When time is considered, consumer behavior appears to be much more rational. Highly skilled people like doctors earn high wages and therefore incur a higher opportunity cost whenever they use their time in some way. They're likely to buy goods over the internet and pay higher prices for things that will save them time. Unskilled workers or retirees therefore have a lower opportunity cost for their time and therefore will use their time to search out ways to save money. They are more likely to search for bargains and take longer trips if it saves them money. Foreigners observe that Americans waste material goods but conserve time. This could be because our high productivity makes our time more valuable than the goods we waste. With medical care purchases being the next tab here, right, we pay an upfront charge each month, and this charge is not affected by the amount we consume. That's our insurance. The additional marginal benefit is higher than marginal cost of additional use. This explains why we use so much more than we had to pay full price. And also, non-cash gifts result in a loss of utility, and we tend to take action to maximize our utility, such as taking it back and exchanging it, etc. Non-cash gifts may yield less utility to the receiver than a cash gift of equal monetary value because the non-cash gift may not match the receiver's preferences. Right? Individuals know their own preferences better than the gift giver. And then the last slide here, we're going to be talking about criminal behavior. Right? The cost of criminal activity consists of the guilt one may feel, the supplies and tools needed for the crime, the foregone income from lawful activity. These costs are generally too high for most people. However, for those who find that their benefits of crime exceeds these costs of crime, right, many may be further deterred due to the cost society levies on lawbreakers, namely fines and possible imprisonment. Economic analysis provides ideas to reduce crime that include ways to increase the cost of crime further. This can be achieved by raising the amount of guilt, right? Cost through family, educational and religious efforts, increasing the direct costs that criminals bear by using more sophisticated security systems, increasing the costs incurred from the foregone income due to criminal activity, with more education and training opportunities, adding more police to raise the probability of being caught, imposing higher penalties on those who are caught. Right? Any one of these could be used to thwart crime by raising the marginal cost of activity to the point that it exceeds the marginal benefit. And that'll be the end of this chapter this week.